Hey y'all, my name is Ann Wyatt. I started my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky in 2010. That experience ignited a deep passion for manufacturing within me. I started this show hoping to raise more awareness around the bright outlook manufacturing careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful changemakers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Workforce 4.0. This is your host, Ann Wyatt. I'm here today with Mark Peters, the CEO of Butterball. We are super grateful for your time today, Mark, because I know you have got so much going on in running a company like Butterball. And I can't wait to have a conversation with you about the workforce, building a more sustainable workforce, maybe technology's role in workforce development. But for those that are listening in today, could you give us a brief introduction of yourself? Because what you're doing is amazing, and we've got to get the word out there for sure.
Well, thank you, Ann. I'm super excited to be here. I love the name of the podcast, Workforce 4.0. I'm in a phase of my life that I call Dad 2.0. My only daughter's gone off to college, so she's a freshman in college, and I'm trying to figure out what that part of my life is all about. So it's for those of your listeners that have had this experience, it's very different from having a kid around all the time and then having them gone. And how do you support them sort of remotely as they're learning the next phases of their life? So that's an interesting theme in my personal life going on. Butterball Farms is a second generation family business. I started working there when I was 12. We've grown the business significantly my dad passed away in 1995. So in the last 30 years, it's been a rocky growth. We were on a pretty good trajectory until COVID came along. We were mostly food service facing business pre-COVID, and post-COVID, we're about 50-50 split between products that end up in a retail customer facing environment and a food service, restaurant, corporate catering, those kinds of environments. So I think we're a far more stable business than we were pre-COVID. So we learned some new tricks, and so we have a much more interesting product mix, I think, in our business the last 4 years than any time in our history, which is great. I think that relative to what we're going to talk about today, what does that workforce look like? What does workforce development look like? And what can we do as employers about our workforce? And I think there's a lot more that we can do than we tend to think that we can do. So I'll leave that as sort of as maybe an opening for us to talk about and see where we go.
I love that so much. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting how you're kind of this living example of how you diversified your business with COVID. And I think that that's similar to maybe a lot of what manufacturers had faced during that time. And that was really kind of the key, it seems like, during that time, was to figure out ways to keep going, maybe diversify the business and maybe expand into things that maybe you weren't as comfortable with previously, but now you're kind of able to venture into new markets doing that.
Yeah, and it's the most frightening time that I've ever gone through as a business owner, and I am hopeful that I won't see another one of those events in my life, quite honestly.
Absolutely, yeah. And then a workforce, right? I mean, that was a real strain on everyone. But we'll get into that more into the conversation. But Mark, I've got to ask you the obligatory Workforce 4.0 very first question. And I'm going to know if you were out somewhere. First of all, do you do karaoke? Are you a karaoke fan?
So I saw that question, and I don't really sing very well. My mom was a voice teacher, interestingly enough, but
That's cool.
So I have attempted karaoke a few times. I would not say that I've got any real skill in the karaoke singing world, but I'll try it. And so you
Awesome.
want my go-to karaoke song?
Yes. So if we were out and we were doing karaoke, what would you do? What would be your go-to karaoke song?
I absolutely love Bob Seger's Old Time Rock and Roll song. Just take those old records off the shelf, baby.
So that is also one of my very early on favorite karaoke songs. I mean, I'm talking, when I was like 7 or 8, those years. That's like a core childhood memory for me. My dad loved that song, and I love that song. Could I sing that song with you if we were ever to get
Sure,
on a karaoke?
let's do it.
Yeah, awesome. That's a fantastic choice.
Well, thank you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, but we're karaoke events, other kinds of events, they're kind of essential to workforce bonding, if you will, and team bonding. Yeah, so that's kind of the very first question is, what's your favorite karaoke song in the event that we're doing a team bonding activity? But speaking, oh, go ahead.
You just maybe, so we do a annual, we call it our Founders Day event every year. And I always look for some sort of an opening. Maybe I'll do that. Would be a big risk for me to sing Old Time Rock and Roll in front of my entire work. Actually, I really like that idea.
I think that's fun. They would love that idea too. They
absolutely would. That would be a blast.
That would be fun for them. But I think when it comes to growing our workforce, and I know you all are located in Michigan,
yes.
And you're very, very involved
yeah.
in not only doing those team building activities, but also in your greater community
right.
and really building a more sustainable workforce. And I think you've got a lot of value and perspective to share on that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think, it's not an uncomplicated topic, right? And I do think the bonding and some of those activities are important. But I think what's even more important is, building some sort of an infrastructure that's repeatable and can endure across business cycles and all the rest of it. Some of the things that people want to talk about as culture are, they're fun things to do, the events and all the rest of it, but it's how do you turn it into basically blocking and tackling so it can be repeated across, over time and across your workforce. And I think that's tougher for a lot of businesses. And I think it's tough because most of us didn't get into business to do human resources. We went into business to solve some other sort of problem or present a product or a service or whatever it is. And we found out that we were good at it and that the market liked what we were bringing to market. And then we discovered that we needed people to help us do it. And then that's all great and fun in the beginning until you start hitting some road bumps, and then you realize that all those people that came to work for you have a lot of complexities and sometimes become a distraction.
Yeah.
And it's not sort of in our entrepreneurial DNA to be good at human resources. And so the idea of building some sort of infrastructure or process around taking care of our people or investing in talent or building a good workplace culture is not something that maybe is natural to a lot of them. And so, when I first started going out and talking about some of the things around workforce, sometimes I like to make fun of us entrepreneurs because we make some decisions that don't make sense to a lot of other people. And because I am one, I get to do it. But I also decided I didn't want to be too hard on people and say, look, you guys, we have this obligation or this responsibility to do it. And so I've sort of shifted the language to say, we have this opportunity to do this. And those of us that have small mid-market companies or have the opportunity to lead much larger organizations, when we really stop and think about all the people that come to work for us and the amount of time that they spend with us, the opportunity for influencing people's lives is huge. Most people that come to work for me spend more time in my house than they do doing anything else in their lives. And if that doesn't strike you as requiring some sort of responsibility with that time, I'd be surprised. Most entrepreneurs that I meet really do care about the people that work for them. The question tends to be, what can I do
Hmm.
that I don't already do?
And that's a really hard question. I mean, well, it's an easy question, right? But the nature of that is very complex because you are dealing with so many different individuals
Right.
as opposed to, I mean, if you know, a machine breaks right on your line, there's a process to figure out what's wrong with it and then fix it. If someone is sick or something is happening in someone's personal life, there's not an SOP for that. There's not a manual for that. So that's really important. And then when we're kind of reaching out in the communities and we're growing our talent, I think we've, by and large, in manufacturing up to a certain point, have been kind of, I don't know, it feels to me like we're very individualistic. It's all about, you know, come work for me, spend like you said, your time with me.
Right.
It's kind of very centered from a company perspective.
Right.
And I guess, like, how do we shift that perspective on a community level from being so individualistic to maybe more altruistic?
Well, and I read that question, and I think that I'm actually going through this with a nonprofit that I participate in right now. And there's this, I think that there's some words that make entrepreneurs' skin itch a little bit. And I think when you say you need to be more, you need to be more altruistic, they're like, but I think the
I feel
question,
seen.
well, and I don't think you're wrong. I just think, words matter, right? And it's like,
Yes.
and again, I look at all of the organizations that are supported by business, and I think what you said earlier before the word altruistic is absolutely right. We tend to be enterprise centric, and we are
Mhm.
trained that way. Our HR people train us that way. Our attorneys train us that way. Everything we do from the time we hire the first person is protect the enterprise. And all of the lexicon, all of the words about bringing people onto the team are great words, like join our team, rah, rah, high five, glad you're here, we're going hard, we've got, and then but when somebody has to leave, like if we have to let somebody go or they leave on their own, the lexicon changes dramatically. And if you start sort of looking at, you're terminated, we're going to let you go explore better pastures, where someone gives you 2 weeks notice and now you're in crisis mode. It's
Mhm.
victim language. And it is like it's the only language that I've been able to find for entrepreneurs and people that run companies that sort of fall in this victim language subset. What's surprising to me is this is a problem that we've never really tried to solve. And what we do is solve problems in the world. That's what entrepreneurs exist to do. And if this were a process waste problem in our plants, our lean folks would have figured it out by now.
Mhm.
And so, but a lot of our thinking, to your point, is enterprise centric. And I think what you're suggesting, and again, I agree with, is to go to more of a people centric approach. And I actually think that the real goal is to be both and. It's interesting because we live in this world of either or, like all the time.
Yeah.
And
Or like black or white, and there's wrong and right. And that's
you're
hard to navigate as an entrepreneur myself. I mean, that's, you're always guessing stuff, right?
yeah, but I think what's interesting is when and again, I love because we dismiss stuff that we're not familiar with, but we tend to not look for parallels. So a lot of us, if we thought about the people that work for us the way we think about our customers, we would find a much easier line of approach to how to develop a better culture and talent, pool within our own organizations. We when you're out interacting with your customer, you're trying to understand what their needs are, what their pain points are, how you can help them with those pain points. One of the most ineffective ways of selling is to go out and just tell somebody everything that you have and that you can do without understanding whether they need it or not.
That's right. Yes.
Right. And so we tend to approach people like, here's all the stuff that we can do for you. Here's your benefits. Here's here's the way we work. And we don't spend a lot of time figuring out, what do our people want? I think that's sort of so how do we move to more, I'm going to change your word from altruistic to people centric, is taking some of the time to understand the people that work for us. So maybe if I like, one of the biggest weaknesses that we have is that we don't understand our workforces. And I run into this frequently when I talk about this. Is there's a thing called the Alice threshold, and it's different by community, but it's not exactly the poverty line, but it's like a family of five. I think in Michigan right now it's $65,000 or $70,000 a year. That if they're making below that, they're pretty much living a very, very close to being destabilized life.
Mm.
Well, you get to a room full of people and you ask them, how many people do you know that fall in this category? And very few people will be like, oh yeah, I know a lot of people. But when you start thinking about your kids' teachers, and you start thinking about the people that do your hair, when you start thinking about the people that check you out at the grocery store, when you start thinking about people who are running your APAR department, and pretty soon you've got a pretty big list of people that that are living they're not going to present to you that they're in crisis, but they're worried about whether they can make their house payment. They're worried about their car payment. They're worried about, buying the next set of clothes for their kids, or if they're going to be able to take them on a vacation, or if they can afford summer camp, and just go down the line. And these are stressors that far more people in our workforces are living every day than a lot of us are aware of. So
Absolutely.
I think part of it is sort of starting with an awareness of where your workforce is coming from. The people that come to work for you, what sort of things are they bringing to work with them, even subconsciously, that are creating stress and pressure points in their lives. And so my first book, The Source, is really brings, we talked a few minutes ago about having a process. And so The Source was really designed to help people solve some of those problems that come up in their life. Because let's be honest, as employers, that is not our job. And we do not,
That's
we
right.
don't, we don't
Yeah.
want our HR team being housing specialists or transportation specialists or daycare specialists. But boy, would it be nice if we could find those resources for our employees.
Yeah. Or have like a really quick directory.
Right.
Like
Well, and so what the Source and the adaptations across the country of the Source have been able to do is really help the individual that is struggling with one of those things find an answer quickly, and often make personal introductions. So speed to execution for solving some of those problems. So I think once you get your workforce, you understand that you have some processes around stabilization, that's meaningful. So you want to work on culture. Doing things that are meaningful to people in their everyday lives has a huge impact. And it's a big differentiator because a lot of employers don't know how to get there. And there's not a vehicle for them to get there. But we've got over 20 years of history and data now, so we can help show communities how to build, how to build that model and show other employers how it works. And so we can help them do it a lot faster than it's been done before.
See, I love that. And that's part of your nonprofit work. Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Can you kind of share a little bit more about the nonprofit itself and what the mission is?
Yeah, so I mean, in all transparency, the source, I'm not on the board anymore. I'm more of like a spirit leader for it than anything else. But
Yeah.
we launched it 21 years ago, 22 years ago. It'll be 22 years at the end of this year. Um, with 8 companies. We now in West Michigan we have 28 companies. And I think they cover over 14,000 lives. They're expanding to the east side of the state. But really, um, it really is an organization that's set up to find resources for the people that work for the member companies. It's not about recreating anything. So we're not solving for childcare or housing or transportation or food scarcity. We're finding resources in the community that our people can access. And we're finding those organizations that do their work really well in the community to help the people that work for us get through some of those hurdles in their lives. And I think that's really interesting model because a lot of nonprofits start because they see a problem that somebody else isn't doing well and they want to fill in those gaps.
Right.
And what we basically said is, look, these resources exist in our community. And if we start utilizing the ones that do it well, that's good for those nonprofits because they need the client stories, they need the success, they need those things to keep getting their funding and all the rest of it. So it ends up working really well, both for the community organizations, for the employees of the member companies, but it also helps people stay at work, stay focused and engaged at work, and those individuals ascribe that benefit to their employer. They know that the employer down the street doesn't have the same relationship with the source as
Yeah.
their employer does. So there's some stickiness there, right?
It's definitely a great retention tool, but it's also more importantly, it's giving people on the front line and throughout your organization a sense of stability.
Right. And I think it's, again, I get a little itchy with the word altruistic because it what I'm looking for is I do want to see people thrive in their lives. And I want to see them solve problems. I want to see them reach a level that they can take on the next bit of learning or the next promotion or whatever it is that they want to do next. And I want to be a part of that journey. And I also have some work that needs to be done and I need their help to get it done.
That's
It's more symbiotic than altruistic. Let's just be fair about
And I think that's 100% fair, though. I think that's, the point of, like you're saying, a small, medium enterprise
that.
is to have that partnership. But even retraining your mind to think about it as a partnership is a huge step.
Right. So one of the, like, when you sent me some questions to think about, one of your questions was, what's the biggest weakness? And I do think the biggest weakness is we don't understand our work. We don't understand the people that come to work for us. And we don't tend to think about talent development in what's in it for them.
Hmm.
So I think that if the first thing to think about is, what are the people who come to work for you? What is their life like? Their life context. And I think the second thing is, what are they passionate about?
Yes.
We tend to, going back to like, hey, you're on our team, woohoo, let's go. And so you're on my finance team, and so you're coming in, you're doing AR or analytics or something, and so clearly you want this finance track. Well, maybe they don't. Maybe they just needed a job for a while and they're really passionate about being a school teacher or something else. But
Yeah.
what we tend to do is we tend to say, we'll send you to training, we'll invest in ongoing education and development if It's in this line. But this line might not have anything to do with what you're passionate about. And this is a little bit of a sticking point. And it's going to be, I anticipate having lots and lots of conversations as I go out and talk about my second book around this very specific thing about what I'm willing to invest in and what I'm not willing to invest in as an employer. And what I'm saying is invest in whatever they're interested in. It doesn't matter. And so this is where you get that little bit of shift from enterprise centric to people centric. And if you are going to take a hard stance on being enterprise centric and what you're willing to invest in, you're going to have a much more difficult time attracting talent for any of your positions, because as the demographics shift and the choices that people have and employers that they can go to work for change, people are going to be able to choose the employer that's willing to invest in what they're passionate about. And I'll make a prediction, and we can write it down here on your show.
Okay.
That the next major benefit that will, and I don't know if it's 5 years, but it's coming, and it's going to come fairly quickly, I believe, that is going to be greens fees for benefits is ongoing education. I think it's absolutely going to be, we don't ask people, hey, we'll give you health insurance if you stay for 5 years. We'll give you 401k if you stay for 5 years. Those are greens fees. Like, you're going to have those things. You're not going to get talented people to come work for you.
I've actually already seen a few cases in recruiting where education's being kind of offered, not as like, it's not in the standard benefits package, like I think is what you're saying maybe, but it's one of those things that it's like, okay, we interviewed this person. This is what they're dealing with school right now. And this is how we're going to make a plan to help them and assist them if they come work for us to get through it. Yeah.
So I think what you're seeing is the beginning of what will ultimately be, it'll be part of a candidate's questions. Like, what's your education benefits do you have for me? And if you don't have them, they're not going to play with you.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I could really see that being an option coming down the line. But I love that you're so transparent about your work and how you're leading and taking those skills that you've learned throughout your experience and really committed to just having a very real conversation about this is where we are. This is how we can benefit from an employer standpoint, and this is how we can benefit kind of the greater community from an employee standpoint.
Right. And so I tend to believe that any education that somebody gets working for me makes them a better decision maker, a more robust team player. The other thing that I tend, and this is maybe goes into the three things you would suggest for companies. The third one is be more okay with people leaving.
Yes.
It's a very interesting dynamic to me. Like, I'm not going to invest in people unless they stay with me. It's like, well, you can't guarantee that. And if somebody decides it's time to go to another organization, do you really want them to stay on and be dissatisfied anyway?
That's a great point. And I mean, I think that that's going to absolutely shock. I think the initial reaction to that concept is going to shock a lot of people, but you're not wrong. I mean, when you think about the options for someone out in the workforce that's looking, it's becoming more and more of just a reality. And I mean, it's really been that way since around 2016, 2015, right?
But here's the dynamic that we face, right? Nobody wants to go to their boss and say, I'm looking for another job, because immediately they're going to be taken out of, whatever progression pathway they're on. Oh, they're not committed to our company anymore. We're kind of done with them. And so we don't have these honest conversations in the workforce. We miss the opportunity to partner with somebody in their journey for their own career. even if that means leaving our companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a huge opportunity for us. Again, if I can challenge, if I can successfully inspire other leaders to look at that talent development piece in a very, again, people-centric, not enterprise-centric way, see that, I go as far in the book as to suggest building, and this is what I'm trying to do personally, build a network of employers that people can go to from my company. I eventually would like to get to the point of bonusing my HR team on promoting people to other organizations. That to me, if we had a cadence around X number of people that moved every year to better jobs in other companies, and we could say we were truly developing people through our organization, that would be the holy grail of this work for me. And then if I could inspire other companies to do the same thing, that would be like the icing on the cake.
That's amazing. Well, because you are building just a more sustainable workforce. And at the end of the day, you had a part in that. And that's not something we should be upset about. We should be very proud of that.
Well, and the odd and strange thing is it happens anyway. People leave our companies all the time. And sometimes they go on to better jobs and sometimes they go on to worse jobs. But we all operate our businesses in a community. We know other companies. We could relatively easily build networks of employers that share some of the cultural values that we share, so that the experience that an individual has with our company could be similar in the next company. Because it's a bit of a crapshoot for the individual too. They don't know when they start that new job if it's going to be as great as the recruiters tell them it's going to be.
Right.
Sometimes it isn't, right? So I think that they're in that whole people leaving our companies or going on to other opportunities. There's some real opportunity for us. I think there's opportunity for us to become just a much better version of maybe things that are already good within our companies.
I think so too. And I mean, that's only going to make, everyone's companies stronger at the
Right.
end of the day. And you're going to come out with a much more qualified, higher skilled workforce for sure.
Right. I have a couple of customers actually that I've asked if we got to a certain point, if they would be interested in us supplying talent to them, because we work with some very large companies and they've got big career paths, and they're like, yeah, that would be great. But again, I don't want it to be one off. I actually want to build some process around it. So that's kind of what I am currently working on. That's part of what's coming out in my book, The Retention Trap, which launches in June. And the premise is our focus on trying to retain talent leads us to some really not great decision making. And again, it leads us to that enterprise-centric set of decisions, and it leads us away from the people-centric set of decisions that keep us focused on the people that work for us.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to get into your book. So tell us all about that, when we can expect to see it out. But really, what are some of the themes also that we can take away from your new book?
Yeah, thank you. So it's coming out June 3rd. It's available for pre-order right now on Barnes & Noble and Amazon, and those are the two that I'm aware of right now. So when I started doing research for this, I became aware of some really big investments. So again, I tend to represent the small and mid-market companies, and of which they're, depending on the statistics you read, 50% of working America works for one of our organizations. But for example, the Chamber of Commerce Foundation has developed a talent pipeline management curriculum that is very robust. And they have been rolling it out across the country with a high degree of success. And it's being adopted by large companies. And so they're really applying supply chain theory to assuring your talent pipeline for a decade or two.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's, again, for small and mid-market companies who maybe don't have the time to go out and do this kind of research, knowing that there are these forces in play that are already anticipating what are these kids that are in high school and even middle school going to be interested in doing in 15 years?
That's a really good question that we absolutely should be asking.
Right. But there's already forces that are working on that, looking to get that talent supply into specific industry segments. And if we're not aware of it,
We want it here.
right, exactly. We need to be aware of it. And the curriculum's available to small and mid-market companies, and it's available in a lot of communities around the country. And the U.S. Chamber Foundation would love to have more small businesses involved. So anyway, I sort of go out and do a survey of what's going on in the country at sort of a higher, bigger level, and saying, our future talent supply is important, and we all need to be aware of what's going on. Because if we're not going to be able to compete for talent in the future at a price that's going to allow us to deliver our product or our value strategy, right? So the question is, how do you compete with what some of these much larger, companies and even government organizations are doing to secure future talent? And I think what we as the smaller and mid-market companies, the opportunity that we have is we're really much closer to the people that work for us. So where we can execute far more effectively than the larger companies is we really can execute better on the people-centric piece of the equation. We can go find the tools that help us be enterprise-centric and apply some of the principles for sort of that talent pipeline. But we can surpass those companies on really being on the people-centric piece of that puzzle. So I think we have a much greater opportunity to execute on the both and than some of these large scaled companies that are going to be very policy and procedure driven, almost by.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, I think, our biggest gap, and I'd love your opinion on this, is really kind of reaching the members in your own organization and also your communities that are maybe the parents of these incoming generations. And how do we, change their mind to also steer their children into manufacturing?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't really addressed that in the book, and it's a little late to change that. But
Well, we need a sequel. I mean, we need like another book.
but you know what? I say that, but again, for small and mid-market companies, and especially like manufacturers that operate within a community, what are your community interactions? Do you have a relationship with a local school system? Whether it's a private school system or the public school system, are you a known partner for those organizations? So, I think to answer your question, you've got to think about where would you run into the parents of kids? Where would you get that opportunity to interact with them around the importance of manufacturing? And I think, again, we have all these mental models of things in our lives, right? And so for a lot of people that maybe don't come from a manufacturing background, you say a manufacturing job, and immediately somebody's thinking their kid's going to be a factory worker.
But that's not always the case. And even if it is the case at first, I've talked to so many people that have maybe started out on the plant floor and then they've moved up into other positions throughout the company.
Well, and I think, again, more and more the skill set required to have a, even saying a job on the plant floor, I think people, again, there's a mental model about that. But I literally, and I'm in food packaging, right? We're not high tech. We're not making, memory chips or anything like that. I have engineers walking around my plant floor, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, mechanical engineers, system engineers. So we're not the skill set required to run a manufacturing facility anymore are very different than what they were 50 years ago. And we have analysts. We have I guess some of the engineers do like, value stream mapping, workflow analysis. There's all kinds of important work that is being done by very skilled individuals in a manufacturing facility. And so, yeah, I think that having the opportunity to talk to parents about what those skill sets are, where does that happen in a community? And we've got West Michigan we have a great manufacturing community that I think does a great job doing that. Maybe that's why I haven't felt very there's a lot of other people in our community that talk about those kinds of things in West Michigan. So maybe that's why it hasn't been sort of top of mind for me. I still find challenging employers to think differently about how they interact with their own talent is still my pretty specific calling.
I love that. I love that as well, though. And I mean, it's an ever evolving conundrum, if you will. It's like an ever evolving scenario. So, keeping that in mind as well, thinking about what works today may not work in 20 years.
I can get more people to think about manufacturing and the importance of manufacturing. So this maybe goes back to the beginning about what's my favorite karaoke song. I love going to the grocery store, and I believe that the grocery store is the epitome of the American dream. So if you walk through the grocery store, and I always go to the olive section because I don't eat a lot of olives, but apparently lots of people eat a lot of olives. And you can buy black olives and green olives and sliced olives and diced olives and Kalamata olives. And it's this huge array of choices that come together in the grocery store just when it comes to olives. But if you start peeling back all of the items that are in your grocery store and realize that somebody had to package those.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody had to develop the packaging and the process to get the product into the packaging, which required somebody to build some equipment, right? And then it required somebody to go procure all of the base materials that go into putting those products together, the marketing plan, the distribution and transportation plan, all so that you can go have any particular kind of olive that you want at the grocery store. Every product, as you walk through the grocery store, has a story about how it got there. And almost every one of those stories comes through a manufacturer of some kind.
It's the coolest thing if you really think about it.
You will never leave
I think about that.
Grocery store if you start thinking about the story of every product you pick up.
I think about paper a lot, oddly enough. I think about toilet paper and paper towels because I've worked a lot in pulp paper, and I think about that.
Sure.
But I don't think normal. Now, my sister, I tell this story all the time because my sister-in-law, now she's got 4 kids, all different ages. She's running around 3 counties in one day. She's that mom.
Right.
And now she is never, I don't think she's the average American, really.
Okay.
She's not going to think about toilet paper like to that degree. And I don't think that the average American, I say that to say that I don't think that the average person probably does, but I wish we could change that. Like I wish we could bring that up somehow. I don't know.
I do. I truly think that the grocery store is an amazing place to witness the benefits of all the work that manufacturers do, in our country. I mean, you could say that about a lot of things. Every time you get in your car, if you really start to think about where all those parts came from and how they all came together to run this machine that you just, punch the button and shift the lever and it does all of these amazing things. And you can repeat that story over and over again in all of our lives. The grocery store is my sort of focal point of all the amazing work that people do every day in manufacturing to bring food and paper products and all the other products we find in the grocery store. There's my story to attach us all to manufacturing.
I love it. I think that's a great use case for that. And I think that, like I said, I mean, I wish more people thought about it. So I love that you brought that up. Mark, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for your time again today. For those that want to learn more about your book or about the amazing work that you're doing, what is a good point of contact for you?
Well, it's Mark Peters at butterballfarms.com is my email address. We have I3 Leadership. I don't know. Can we put links in this? We can send you some.
Yes,
links.
we will put all your contact information in the show notes of the podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, that's probably the best way. My assistant Carrie fields a lot of things for me. Look for The Retention Trap by Mark Peters on Barnes & Noble or Amazon. Pre-order it. That would be great. Yeah.
We will put a link to that as well in the comments for everyone listening.
Yeah. And I really want to thank you, Ann, for having me on. The opportunity to get in front of employers in particular and, have some robust conversation about some of these ideas is really where I want to go with my career in the next several years. So again, I'm open to speaking to chamber events, Rotary groups, affinity groups, if anybody thinks it could be helpful or interesting. And yeah, I just feel very strongly about this opportunity that we have with all of the complexities going on in our world today. We really have a great opportunity as employers to have a positive impact, not just on our organizations and our people, but on our communities. And our enterprises are just an integral part of making our communities successful. I've lived it and I believe it. And I think a little bit more intentionality around our talent can go a long way for us. So.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. From my perspective, that's really why, I'm so passionate about it. That's really why I started the show to begin with. I think we've got to start doing something quickly.
Yeah. And, you've had a lot of people on. I had the opportunity to, listen to some of the podcasts before coming on. And, I think what you're doing is, assembling leaders that think in a similar way. And, maybe you put together a little conference of past podcast members at some point in the future and have a symposium or something like that, because the more we can share these ideas and learn from each other, the better we all get.
Mark, I think that's a fantastic idea. And I think that's been on my mind as well. So we will have to see how that plays out. But for everyone listening today, I really appreciate your time. Hit Mark up. He is an amazing human and is very committed to this industry. And Mark, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Ann. Have a great afternoon.